Hello, hey, what is going on, Los Angeles? It's J. T. And today is Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. And on this day, I am going to talk to you a little bit about some rather little known history regarding the Trump family and their ties to immigration in particular. Because I think what more opportune moment than this moment right now, this historical moment that we're living through, to think a little bit about just where a lot of this policy is coming from and what it shows, what it exposes even about the complicated relationship and the ongoing struggle between the state and citizenship and or migration. And to do that, to talk about this with you, I'm actually going to go over this little known letter published on Harper's Magazine in 2017 that is just jaw droppingly telling about the Trump family and how they got to the United States to begin with. But before I do that, I just want to go over one other thing for a minute, and that is none other than this thing called the US Constitution. And the reason I'm going to go over that with you for just a second here is because without this Constitution, we have nothing in the United States. And this is just to say that when you are out there browsing through the web and you come across these videos about ICE and you check out the comments section and you hear people talk about law, you hear these keyboard warriors ramble on and on about the law. I just want to, well, place that into perspective because there is no higher document. There is no more overarching article than the US Constitution in terms of what law is in the United States, what it is required to be, and for whom it applies. So without that US Constitution, for example, I wouldn't be able to do this video right here, right now, because the First Amendment of the US Constitution grants the right of free speech. It even grants the right of religion. It grants the right of assembly, which means people have a right to assemble out there and protest policies that they disagree with. That is a founding principle. It's the first document of the amendments to the US Constitution. So let's not miss that going forward. Let's not let that escape us or elude us going forward. People have the right to say what they want to say in this country. They have the right to disagree with policies adopted by our government, and they've got the right to assemble over exactly just that. So for anyone to attack this or people's ability to engage in any of these activities is for them to attack the US Constitution itself. Now, let's go ahead and look at our Second Amendment for just a moment because that's useful too. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. Now, I'm not a huge proponent of gun ownership. By and large, I am a pacifist, and by and large, I believe that, well, I know I'm not alone. I know I'm one in millions who believe that the United States has absolutely misinterpreted this amendment in particular, and this is evidence no better than the fact that we have more shootings and mass shootings in this country than anywhere else on earth. We have more guns than people in the United States, as far as I understand, and this is being heinously misapplied out there, but it's guaranteed as a right by the US Constitution. And lo and behold, 1 year after the next, people hang on to their arms because it's a guaranteed right. So again, overarching document, overarching legal document that grants people rights and privileges. Oh, and notice that I said people too, not citizens, which we'll get to in a second. Actually, lo and behold. So the Fourth Amendment guarantees that people have the right to be secure in their persons. It doesn't say anything about citizens of the United States. It says people inside of the United States. So don't lose sight of that, because this whole question about citizenship, which we're going to delve into with respect to our segment on the Trump family specifically is, again, misapplied out there, right? Like, what is a U.S. citizen? We're really going to look into that through this analysis of the special document with respect to the Trump family and their migration to the United States, so to speak. So do keep that in mind. But this guarantees that all people in the United States have the right against unreasonable searches and seizures, aka arrests or arrests without a warrant. That is guaranteed against in the US Constitution, the overarching legalistic document in the United States. Do not forget it. That's what people are pointing out about these ICE raids right now. And there's no way around it. There's nowhere in our founding document where you can find an exception being made for, quote, non-citizens. So for all of you historians out there and all of you, text-based scholars out there, this is it. This is all you need to know about the rights people have against being racially profiled in the United States. That's why there's an injunction that's just been issued against ICE and its heinous mass roundup of brown people all over Los Angeles County and beyond. And that's why we're going to win that legal battle. The U.S. Constitution backs us up. It's older than the Trump administration, Stephen Miller, and all the other goons notwithstanding. So don't forget it. Last but not least, the Fifth Amendment guarantees that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or other infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in land or naval forces, or in the militia when in actual time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against themselves, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So once again, if there is no due process, that any person being accosted or apprehended or arrested by the U.S. government that they may look forward to in their trial, in their proceedings, in a so-called deportation hearing, then that is an unreasonable violation of the U.S. Constitution, of the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's that simple. Once again, it says nothing about citizenship, but everything about personhood. And if we're talking about people in the United States and not anything else, not getting distracted, not going on a tangent of any other sort, if we're talking just about people in the United States, then all persons in the U.S., by virtue of the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, have the right to due process, the right to a fair trial before their peers, before their contemporaries. Anything else is a violation. That's just what the text gives us. That's what the overarching document, which this country depends on, gives us. So just a primer on that, because there are a lot of folks out there who have forgotten this, disregarded this, completely done away with this, and that is what our people are protesting out on these streets and all over the nation, and for good reason. It is the democratic thing to do. It is guaranteed to us to be able to do by the U.S. Constitution. So it's just a matter of what the text says, baby. That's all it is. That's all it is. Without it, we have nothing here. We can run amok as any of us may see fit. And that's supposed to be the world that we escaped from, actually, way back when, in this sort of fairy tale story of how the nation was founded. So let that be known. Let the city know. With that out of the way, let's get into our feature for this segment, for this chapter of the Los Cuentos journey of JT the LA Storyteller Podcast. Oh, let me hold that up. So this is a letter from way back when in 1905, written by none other than Friedrich Trump, Donald Trump's grandfather, a Bavarian citizen, once a Bavarian citizen, who left Bavaria at 16 years old, most would say to avoid military service, compulsory military service at the time, for the United States, where he eventually ended up making a fortune, but which he eventually did not actually want to live in, as evidenced by his return to Bavaria, which the Bavarian prince then did not like. So, without further ado, let's just read the letter, because this segment, this installment of JT the LA Storyteller Podcast is all about the letter. Let's just read what it says and be clear about that for everybody's reference. So, it begins, "Most serene, most powerful Prince Regent, most gracious Regent and Lord, I was born in Kallstadt on March 14th, 1869. My parents were honest, plain, pious vineyard workers. They strictly held me to everything good, to diligence and piety, to regular attendance in school and church, to absolute obedience toward the high authority." Okay, Friedrich Trump, okay. "After my confirmation in 1882, I apprenticed to become a barber. I emigrated in 1885, in my 16th year. In America, I carried on my business with diligence, discretion, and prudence. Okay, lived a quiet life, a humble life. God's blessing was with me, and I became rich. I obtained American citizenship in 1892. In 1902, I met my current wife. Sadly, she could not tolerate the climate in New York, and I went with my dear family back to Kallstadt." California was still in those early stages then. I'm sure they would have loved to come to California then, had it been set up and established for them. But no, Friedrich Trump and his wife opted to go back to Bavaria in southern Germany, what is today southern Germany. "The town was glad to have received a capable and productive citizen upon his return, obviously. My old mother was happy to see her son, her dear daughter-in-law, and her granddaughter around her. She knows now that I will take care of her in her old age." Okay. "But we were confronted all at once, as if by a lightning strike from fair skies, with the news that the High Royal State Ministry had decided that we must leave our residence in the Kingdom of Bavaria. We were paralyzed with fright. Our happy family life was tarnished. My wife has been overcome by anxiety, and my lovely child has become sick." Whoa. It sounds like it had an adverse impact to learn that they would be deported. Trump's own grandpa. "Why should we be deported? This is very, very hard for a family. What will our fellow citizens think if honest subjects are faced with such a decree? Not to mention the great material losses it would incur. I would like to become a Bavarian citizen again." Wow. "In this urgent situation, I have no other recourse than to turn to our adored, noble, wise, and just sovereign Lord, our exalted ruler, His Royal Highness, highest of all, who has already dried so many tears, who has ruled so beneficially and justly and wisely and softly, and is warmly and deeply loved, with the most humble request that the highest of all will himself in mercy deem to allow the applicant to stay in the most gracious kingdom of Bavaria. Signed, your most humble and obedient Friedrich Trump." Friedrich Trump, Donald Trump's grandfather, who wanted to remain in Bavaria, but who would ultimately be deported in, I believe, the year 1905, and whose son would then be Donald Trump's father. This man invested in real estate throughout New York, who eventually produced the 45th and 47th president of the United States. So there you have it. And the reason that this is important is because in the days ahead, when we talk about citizenship once again, and who is a citizen and who is law abiding, we're going to have to remember that were it not for Donald Trump's own father, Fred Trump, being essentially an anchor baby due to his grandfather's deportation back to the United States, when the prince decided that, hey, no, like, I'm going to avenge myself, I'm going to avenge my kingdom for your desertion, for your abandonment of your military duties way back when. If it weren't for all this, we'd not have a 45th and 47th president today, right? So this idea that we can maybe revoke citizenship out there, that we can take a look at all the anchor babies out there. The question is, from where do we start and where does it end? Because if we take the 20th century as a basis altogether, then guess what? Fred Trump himself, RIP, may his soul rest in peace. Fred Trump himself would need to have his citizenship retroactively revoked, and so would Donald Trump then. Donald Trump would have to line up for a deportation hearing, if those are still around by then, and face the music, so to speak, right? So this is just to point out the deep contradictory nature of leveling these claims against people, once against people in the United States, and going as far as one can, going as far as a fascist state of mind will take one, as they seek to consolidate their power over everyone and everything else, the courts and the MAGA base notwithstanding, right? So I want you to think about this. I want you to know that this is just facts on the ground, right? The U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, every last amendment to the U.S. Constitution, that's what our system is governed by. Even if it's not like, to a T, even if it doesn't always honor that 101% altogether, it is still the overarching document for law in the land of the United States. And this history, this letter from Friedrich Trump to the Prince of Bavaria at the time, that's just another historical document that we can't do away with, that we can't just wave a magic wand and make disappear. And so at the end of the day, this is a testament to the importance of truth in the face of a lie, no matter how loud that lie is. Because if this is allowed to be disregarded or discounted, then so should every other truth out there, right? If it is true that an immigrant violated the law, which is a civil offense, by the way, to enter the United States without permission, if it is true that it doesn't matter just what the history entails in each case, then it shouldn't matter whether they violated the law on entering the United States or not, right? This is how contradictions work, or this is what contradictions expose, actually, about just what works for whom when it comes to the law in the current moment. But to be a true citizen, in my mind, and to be truly activated in your democratic rights and in the overarching law of the land which you may call home, guess what? To be active in that and to fight for truth with respect to that, that's what real citizenship means. It's not about where you were born or where you came from. Clearly it's not, because there have been exceptions repeatedly, historically. The United States is an exception to the norms, right? And so let's get that clear. Let's let the city know, because it's just what we got to do. It's J. T.